From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up today on AgDay,
we wanted to say that we cared so much about our soil because it would give us healthy crops. Now all of a sudden, fast forward 40 years and soil's sexy, right?
one farming couple that's finding their strength in the soil.
Commodity Classic kicks off in San Antonio, but the coronavirus has the industry on edge. We'll have an update.
Farmers also on edge, wondering what coronavirus could potentially mean for what China buys and when. We'll have complete coverage from Commodity Classic.
Good morning, I'm Betsy Gibbon. The impact of the coronavirus is not only growing when it comes to the number of people infected around the world, but in the steps being taken to try and slow the spread of this fast-moving virus. Here's the latest. China remains the epicenter of the virus, but now Italy has the highest number of new infections outside of Asia. Brazil's government is also confirming the first case of the virus in Latin America. The virus now spreading to 6 of the world's 7 continents, and there's concern the virus might also become an economic pandemic, with White House advisor Larry Kudlow saying the virus will clip something off the first quarter gross domestic product, but how much, he wasn't sure. China, the second largest economy in the world, could lose tens of billions of dollars this quarter because of factory shutdowns and quarantines. We have a team of reporters at this year's Commodity Classic in San Antonio. We begin with AgDay's Clinton Griffiths. Clinton, are people talking about the coronavirus there as well?
That's right, Betsy, and yes, they are. There are 6 confirmed coronavirus cases here in San Antonio. Those folks aboard the Diamond Princess cruise ship, and they're now under federal quarantine. Beyond the interruption to daily life COVID-19 threatens, there are real chances it could impact agriculture production. We've already seen the challenges associated with exports and containers sitting at ports, but we also buy a lot of products that go into feeds and fertilizers, herbicides, and on that, we may soon see supply disruptions.
A lot of the compounds, the chemicals that farmers use on their farms, they're put together maybe in this country, but the small molecules, the ingredients, a lot of those come from China. And there's starting to be a bit of a disruption in some of that supply chain. And so if you can't get the ingredients to put together to make your chemical, we're going to have a problem. Now we're not there yet, but where are we on this coronavirus thing? Are we in the beginning? Are we in the middle? Or are we kind of tapering off towards the end?
The CDC is now telling people to prepare for their lives to be interrupted. Just how much of an interruption we'll face is still the question. Now, it's still too early to get an official count on attendance here at Commodity Classic, although we have heard that there were some folks that stayed home because of coronavirus concerns. Tyne Morgan is also here in San Antonio, and Tyne, part of this conversation also centers around China and its phase 1 purchases.
Yeah, Clinton, those questions coming from not only commodity leaders, but farmers. But Sorghum Association, it tells me China has already come to the market to buy some U.S. sorghum, and they believe those buys will continue. But National Corn Growers Association telling me they're not sold on the fact that China will indeed buy U.S. corn this year. And as farmers wait to see how coronavirus impacts not only what China buys, but when, that question is starting to eat into producers' patience.
Producers are often told to, sit and wait. Things are going to happen. So, of course, we signed a phase 1 deal with China. Obviously, we've got some physical obstacles to that right now. So with coronavirus going on in China, we hear delays in some of our exports and specifically sorghum. So, as a farmer, it's tough to be told to sit and wait. Things are going to happen. When we've got planning decisions to make, we've still got to keep on farming in the process.
Now, despite all that, Atkinson tells me he is hopeful that China will continue to buy U.S. sorghum and it will help prices. He says if not, MFP 3.0 is needed to help stop the bleeding. Reporting from Commodity Classic in San Antonio, I'm Tyne Morgan for AgDay.
Thank you, Tyne and Clinton. China trade is a topic on Capitol Hill this week. The House Ways and Means Committee holding a hearing on the impact of tariffs, the U.S.-China trade agreement, and trade relationships. Farmers showing both concern and praise.
We certainly know the markets have yet to move, but farmers and ranchers all across America are optimistic. We understand that there's just the beginning of an exciting new chapter, and we patiently await the benefits of this new trade agreement.
Farmers have shouldered the pain for this strategy that has only seen one minor tariff reduction and several tariff escalations. As far as the Phase 1 deal goes, the purchases, which have not yet materialized, are a promise, while the tariffs are still real. The ag economy doesn't live on promises.
But Vice President Mike Pence is thanking farmers for standing strong with the president during the trade war. Pence speaking this week at the Michigan Farm Bureau's Lansing Legislative Seminar.
Because the reality is that it created some uncertainty, but I heard farmers everywhere I went across the country stop me on the street and say, you know, we know it's got to be done, so we're going to stand with you while you get it done. Because you all understand what it is to do hard things, to get hard things done. And because of the strong stand that you took, because of the strong stand President Trump took, just a few short weeks ago, we signed the Phase 1 deal with China, dealing with intellectual property rights and securing $40 to $50 billion in agricultural exports to China in the next 2 years. It's a start.
Another industry waiting to see how the deal with China plays out is cotton. Cotton prices are still hanging in the 60-cent per pound range. This comes as USDA forecasts in its Ag Outlook form that cotton prices are expected to rise 1 cent to 64 cents during 2020. The department economists anticipate cotton acreage to dip to 12.5 million acres, a potential decrease of 9% from 2019.
Also, our competitiveness between other countries just due to the value of the dollar. Those are other factors besides just China, but China certainly would help with a reduction in tariffs.
The National Cotton Council announcing earlier in the month its acreage expectation is 13 million acres, still a dip from 2019. A strong snow system is continuing to push across the country right now. Let's get an update from meteorologist Mike Hoffman.
Thanks, Betsy. Yeah, there's been a pretty big storm, especially with the snow across the Great Lakes, parts of the northern Mississippi Valley. That is continuing to move through New England today. Now, the southern part of that is the cold front, and that is already surpassed southeastern portions of Florida. Very cold air coming into northern Florida. Might even be a frost in parts of northern Florida. We'll take a look at that coming up. And another concern right now, what could happen as the snow begins to melt? Andy Dunbar of the National Weather Service in Des Moines sharing this picture. This is the Des Moines River, and you can see there's the potential for an ice jam starting right there. We certainly don't want a repeat of last spring. I'll have more in your forecast as we head through the rest of the week coming up.
The American Soybean Association Conservation Legacy Awards are brought to you by the United Soybean Board. As demand for sustainability rises, meeting those demands remains a journey of continuous improvement. Which sustainable practices do you do now? Which ones could you adopt to improve your sustainable footprint?
The ag industry is often blamed for algae blooms, nitrogen, and phosphorus problems. One New Yorker turned farmer is engaging in conversations with her suburban Wisconsin neighbors to both do a better job and make a difference. And her actions on the farm could be considered groundbreaking. Clinton Griffiths reports on another 2020 Conservation Legacy Award winner.
And then we'll connect out of that back into the existing tile lines.
It's not a surprise to see Nancy Kavazanjian and her husband Charles Hammer out working on a project.
If we can reduce the phosphorus, we can show that we're not contributing to that problem anymore.
They've been doing projects together for 40 years, no-tilling and being land conscious for 30 of those, adopting the motto, our soil, our strength.
We wanted to say that we cared so much about our soil because it would give us healthy crops. Now all of a sudden, fast forward 40 years, and soil's sexy, right?
The two own and operate Hammer and Kavazanjian Farms, a farm in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, that's been in the Hammer family for more than 150 years. Nancy, however, grew up in suburban Long Island, New York. Today, Nancy and her husband focus on protecting the farmland, creating the highest quality food, feed, and protecting the waters by it, and caring for the community. They've committed to both wind.
It offsets about 70% of the electrical needs of our farm.
And solar energy. They're big on cover crops, and we're among the first to adopt no-till and strip-till in the area.
The radishes help break up the soil better in here. They also scavenge the leftover nitrogen and hold it there.
All while also protecting pollinators.
The first year or two, it was a mess. It looked awful.
And thinking ahead for the next generation.
Maybe it'll pay for their college education. We know that those black walnuts are worth a lot of money.
Nancy is active with a county farmer-led watershed group, sharing with nearby non-farm and lakefront property owners.
And tell them that ag is part of the solution. We have to do more of that. The idea is it's going to reduce and take out almost all of the phosphorus.
They're working with a university to pilot and install a phosphorus reduction system for their existing drainage tiles.
We're going to proof the phosphorus reduction first, then we're going to add the nitrate, we hope, the biofilter next. And so you got to stay tuned for the results of that.
Nancy and Charles have a goal to do the impossible.
I can remember my father-in-law standing there going, oh, that'll never work. And it's worked. And we've been over 30 years of not plowing our soils. Really proud of that.
Proud to be part of the ag industry today and in the future.
But we can say we're part of the solution.
Still ahead, what Amazon is doing that could change grocery shopping as we know it. And a cow with quite a story in the country.
The American Soybean Association Conservation Legacy Awards are brought to you by Bayer. Bayer is committed to delivering better solutions for farmers while enabling them to operate more sustainably. Bayer, science for a better life.
We finally saw a bit of an uptick for soybeans on Wednesday after reports Argentina closed export registrations temporarily ahead of expected higher export taxes on soy products. We get an update from the CME.
The negative sentiment has seized on the futures and really has held the market lower since its plummet of the last 3 or 4 sessions. The virus expansion just means that economic slowdown, reduced consumer spending, as well as reduced restaurant sales. All those things are really weighing heavy on the live cattle market and the feeder market, the entire beef complex. Feeders did rebound, though. They're trying to reinstate some of that bullish optimism, certainly a lot more than the live cattle, but the recovery has been a little bit more, but traders are hopeful that it could be a true sign that maybe these headlines aren't really going to take over the market. But from looking at all the other markets, it definitely is. I expect that we are not going to see a big rally back until we have a handle on what's happening with the coronavirus and how deep it's going for around the world and what kind of effect it's going to have on our ability to export anything, any kind of product. So that remains to be seen. That's going to be something that we're going to watch.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
Mike Hoffman joins us now with a look at weather. Mike, when you look at the map, man, the southeast is no longer in drought. Things have really changed.
I think too wet is an issue like a lot of the Midwest as we head towards spring. Here's the latest drought monitor. And when you take a look at this overall map, there just isn't a lot of drought in the lower 48. And that's been the case a lot recently. We did have some drought, dry conditions a few months ago in the southeast. That's kind of gone away except for a small part of the panhandle of Florida there, northwestern sections. But southeast, southern Texas, you folks are still very dry. Severe and extreme drought in those areas. And it looks like a severe drought in parts of the area from the Four Corner region into southwestern Kansas. Those areas have been getting an occasional bit of moisture. It has been drying out, though, in Texas or California, central California especially. So here was 4 weeks ago, As you can see, we've changed a little bit. We've continued to eat away at those dry areas in the southeast, but we've actually added a little bit in parts of Texas just recently, and then a little bit through the Four Corner region. But the area that's changed probably the most for the bad is Central California, that has gone into a moderate drought in places. All right, 2 storm systems. One's the big one through the northeast. That will continue to move slowly northeastward. It's still going to affect the eastern Great Lakes and New England over the next 24 to 36 hours. This system really won't have a whole lot of moisture with it. You can kind of see that's moving through with a little bit of snow, maybe rain on the south side of it. As it moves through Friday morning, it's moving through the western Ohio Valley, central Mississippi Valley. A couple of storm systems there, Pacific Northwest, neither one going to be a big deal so far. The secondary one, though, will be coming in as we head through later in the day tomorrow, and that one will have more moisture than the one that came before it. You can see this storm system over the central Appalachians. Again, not a lot of moisture with that one. High pressure's building in, and this is even colder air than the original high pressure system, and that's why we're going to see some pretty cold numbers into northern Florida. Precipitation estimate over the past 24 hours, the cold front moving through Florida and parts of the southeast and the northeast, obviously with a lot of moisture. Most of that was in the form of snow. Very little out west. Snowfall, same idea. Past 24 hours, adding in the next 36. Most of it's the eastern lakes into New England. There are the temperatures. Highs today only 50s, northern Florida, teens and 20s, northern Great Lakes. A little bit colder as we head through tonight, obviously. Teens in the northern Great Lakes, 34 in Jacksonville. It's pretty close to a freeze, and we continue to see chilly numbers for most of the east. That's because of this trough. It's going to continue to kind of dig in. You can see by Saturday. And then the next trough digs in out west and doesn't come as far southeast, it looks like, as we head through next week. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. Heading to Merced, California, first of all, partly sunny and comfortable, high of 77. Taking a look at Iron Mountain, Michigan, mostly cloudy, very cold, high of 20. And Tavares, Florida, lots of sunshine, but on the cool side, high temperature just 59.
Up next, new hope for the U.S. cattle industry when it comes to China. An update on a U.S. beef ban that's being lifted next. We're learning more about a decision by China this week to conditionally lift a ban on beef and beef products from U.S. cattle that are more than 30 months old. It's part of a Phase 1 trade deal. Drovers reporting China has said inspection and quarantine requirements on U.S. beef imports will be set and released separately. Chinese officials also saying they will grant exemptions on retaliatory tariffs. The current tariff on beef is 47%.
China lifted its 14-year ban on U.S. beef in 2017, and since then U.S. beef exports have risen, though they remain just a fraction of the total U.S. beef exports. Last year, China bought about 9,300 tons of U.S. beef, valued at $75 million. That's less than 1% of the $8 billion of U.S. beef exported last year.
The U.S. Meat Export Federation says total U.S. beef exports account for 14% of total production, which adds $310 to the value of every fed steer and heifer. And you may soon be able to skip the checkout line entirely at the supermarket when it comes to buying beef and other things. Amazon is opening its first cashierless supermarket. It allows shoppers to grab things like milk, eggs, and meats and walk out without waiting in line or ever opening their wallets. The store opened earlier this week in Seattle. Shoppers have to scan a smartphone app to enter the store. Then cameras and sensors track what's taken off the shelves. Items are charged to an Amazon account after the person leaves. Still ahead, this is not your typical cow or your typical calves. The reason why, next.
AgDay, brought to you by Corvus Corn Herbicide from Bayer. Get an early season win against weeds with Corvus for end of season rewards.
Calving season, it's not unusual to hear about the birth of twin calves, but how about quadruplets? It was quite the surprise last week for one Washington state rancher. A 7-year-old Angus cross cow belonging to Scott English of Washington state gave birth to the group. Drovers reports quadruplets only occur in 1 out of 700,000 births. And when it comes to 4 live, healthy calves, only 1 in 11.2 million. Scott says he bought the group of cows in southern Idaho and brought them to Washington. He saved all of the heifers out of those cows and bred them the next year. He says out of 125 replacement heifers, 17 of them had twins. Scott says this particular cow goes back to that original herd and adds there's something in the genetics of those Idaho cows that they are prone to calving more than one calf. He says all the calves are doing well, with their 3 heifer calves being bottle fed and the bull calf remaining with the cow. That's really something. Well, that's all the time we have this morning. We're glad you tuned in. For all of us here at Ag Day, I'm Betsy Gibbon. Have a great day.